The Hen with the Golden Eggs. Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by emerald hills and whispering woods, lived a kind but struggling couple named Oliver and May. They owned a tiny cottage on the edge of Fernhill Forest and spent their days tending to their humble farm with tired hands and hopeful hearts. Although their fields were small and their animals few, their love for each other made even the simplest meals feel like feasts. One chilly morning, just before the sun had fully risen, May heard a soft tapping at their barn door. Curious, she wrapped herself in her wool shawl and stepped outside. To her surprise, there was no visitor, only a faint golden shimmer coming from inside the chicken coop. She opened the wooden door carefully and gasped. In the middle of the straw nest sat a peculiar hen. Her feathers sparkled like moonlight dipped in gold dust, and her eyes gleamed with a mysterious warmth. Next to her, resting gently on the hay, was a glowing golden egg. May called out to Oliver, and together they stared in disbelief. "Is this some sort of trick?" Oliver whispered, but the egg was real and heavy and made entirely of gold. That morning, the village buzzed with whispers when May traded the egg for more gold coins than they'd ever seen in their lives. The villagers, puzzled and amazed, wondered where the couple had suddenly found such treasure. Back at home, the couple couldn't stop staring at the dazzling bird. They named her Luma, after the light she seemed to carry. Day after day, Luma laid one golden egg, always at sunrise, never more. At first, Oliver and May were overwhelmed with joy. They fixed the broken roof, bought warm blankets, and even gave some food to their neighbors. But soon, joy turned into something else. As the days passed, Oliver and May's life began to change. With each golden egg, their home grew more comfortable. They bought a new stove that never smoked, hung soft curtains at the windows, and filled the pantry with food they once only dreamed of. Luma, the golden hen, remained calm and gentle, laying one shining egg every morning like clockwork. She would hum softly while resting in her straw nest, and sometimes, only when the moon was full, her feathers would glow brighter than lanterns. At first, Oliver and May were content. They had enough to live well, help their neighbors, and save for the future. But soon, they began to wonder, what if there were more? One evening, as the stars began to twinkle, May stared at Luma and said, "Why does she lay only one? What if there are more eggs inside her, just waiting?" Oliver frowned. "You think she's hiding them?" They sat in silence, and the seed of greed began to grow like weeds in their hearts. The next day, they didn't smile as they used to. Oliver counted their coins with furrowed brows. May polished their silver plates again and again, though they were already shining. When Luma laid her daily egg, they no longer thanked her. Instead, they whispered behind her back. In the nearby forest, strange winds stirred the leaves. A quiet squirrel named Theo, who often watched the farm from a distance, noticed the shift. "They've changed," he said to the owl perched on the old pine. "Yes," replied the owl with a slow blink. "The hearts of humans are soft, but easily stained by greed." One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, May shook Oliver awake. "I had a dream," she said in a hushed voice. "I saw inside Luma. It was full of gold, dozens of eggs. All we have to do is open her up, and we'll have everything now." Oliver hesitated. "But what if she's just a hen, Oliver? A magical one, yes, but a hen nonetheless. We've worked hard all our lives. Don't we deserve to be truly rich?" He stared into the darkness. The next sunrise would bring more than just another golden egg. The next morning, the sky was still dressed in shades of deep blue when Oliver crept outside. The air was colder than usual, and the leaves didn't rustle. They listened. He walked into the barn with careful steps, carrying a small wooden box in one hand and a sharpened knife wrapped in cloth in the other. Luma opened her eyes as he entered. She let out a soft cluck, her feathers glowing faintly in the morning light. She wasn't afraid. Oliver stopped. His heart beat loudly. He sat on a bale of hay and looked at her. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Just then, May appeared at the door, her face pale. "Is it done?" He shook his head slowly. "She trusts us." May's jaw tightened. "Then I'll do it." Before he could stop her, she stepped forward and unwrapped the cloth. The knife glinted in the sunlight that had just begun to peek through the cracks in the barn wall. At that very moment, Luma stood up. She didn't flap her wings or run. Instead, she tilted her head, looking at them with the deepest, oldest eyes they had ever seen. The light in her feathers brightened, brighter than ever before. Suddenly, a great wind whooshed through the barn. The windows burst open. Feathers danced in the air like golden snow. The animals outside stirred and cried out. From the woods, Theo the squirrel and the old owl flew to the roof, sensing something was terribly wrong. Then, silence. May blinked. The knife had fallen from her hand. Luma was gone. Not a trace. Only a single golden feather lay where she once rested. Oliver picked it up carefully. It was warm in his hand. What have we done? That day, no golden egg was laid, nor the next, nor ever again. The gold they had saved soon ran out. Their curtains grew dusty. The pantry became bare. The stove cracked, and the villagers whispered. But worse than poverty was the emptiness that filled the barn every morning. The silence where once there was a soft hum of peace. They had not just lost a hen. They had lost a miracle. Days turned into weeks. The cottage grew colder, the barn quieter. Oliver no longer rose before sunrise. May stopped singing while she worked. The golden feather they had found that fateful morning sat on a wooden shelf, untouched, glowing faintly, as if breathing. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled far in the distance, Oliver sat by the window with the feather in his hand. He stared at it for hours, wondering if it still held a spark of Luma's magic. He thought of her gentle eyes, her calm song, her gift, offered freely, never demanded. May entered the room with a candle. "We were wrong," she said softly. "We wanted everything, and now we have nothing." Oliver nodded. "Except this." He showed her the feather. For the first time in many days, May looked closer. The golden strands shimmered under the candlelight. Then something strange happened. A warm wind blew through the house. Though the windows were closed, the feather began to glow brighter, brighter, and brighter still. Suddenly the room faded from sight. When they opened their eyes, Oliver and May were no longer inside their home. They stood in a glade they'd never seen before, a meadow where the flowers glowed under moonlight and the trees whispered in a language older than time. At the center of the glade stood a tree with golden bark and silver leaves, and beneath it, nestled in roots like arms, sat a small egg, glowing softly, not gold, but pearl white. Then a voice echoed through the trees. "You were given a gift, not to possess, but to protect." It wasn't angry, it was sad. You saw only the gold, but not the goodness behind it. May fell to her knees. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "We didn't understand." A soft shape began to appear beside the egg. Luma. But she was not just a hen anymore. She was something more. Her feathers shimmered like starlight, and her eyes held the kindness of the forest, the ocean, and the skies. "I forgive you," she said. "But forgiveness is not the end. It is the beginning." With a flap of her wings, she touched the white egg with her beak. It pulsed once, then vanished. Suddenly, Oliver and May were back in their home. The feather lay quietly in Oliver's palm, no longer glowing, but it now had a single silver streak. They looked at each other, and they understood. The following morning, something had changed. The house felt warmer, though the fireplace remained cold. Outside, the earth, once dry and dull, had a softness to it, as if it had been gently kissed by spring overnight. Oliver stepped out into the morning air and saw something remarkable. The garden behind the barn, which had long been neglected, was now blooming. Bright flowers, golden tulips, silver clover, deep violet pansies, all dancing in the breeze as if welcoming him. May joined him in silence. Her eyes welled up with tears. This wasn't here yesterday. And then they saw it. In the center of the garden stood a wooden sign that hadn't been there before. It was carved by hand with the words, "Here grows what is nurtured by love, not taken by greed." Beside the sign was a nest, small, round, woven of twigs, wild grass, and soft moss. It cradled not golden eggs, but seeds, plain seeds, ordinary looking, but they shimmered ever so faintly. May knelt down and picked one up. As it rested in her palm, she saw flashes, images of trees, animals, laughter, shared meals, the warmth of community, and the smile of Luma. Not riches, richness. "This is our second chance," Oliver whispered. They planted the seeds carefully. Each day they watered them, spoke to them kindly, and watched as they grew. Not into money, but into nourishment. Fruit trees with glowing leaves, vines with berries that sparkled at night, vegetables that hummed when touched by the sun. The villagers, curious, came to see, and Oliver and May welcomed them. They offered food to the hungry, seeds to the farmers, and shade to tired travelers. Soon, the little cottage became a place of gathering, laughter, and learning. No one spoke of the golden eggs anymore, but all remembered the garden that grew from kindness. The golden feather remained in their home, now framed in wood and glass. They never touched it again, but every time they passed by, it shimmered softly, as if smiling. From time to time, a quiet breeze would rustle the leaves in the garden, and if one listened closely, it sounded like the gentle cluck of a content hen. Far beyond the garden and the little cottage, where the trees grew taller and the sun barely touched the ground, lived Theo, the squirrel who had once watched Luma from the treetops. Theo was no ordinary squirrel. He wore a tiny satchel made of birch leaves, and inside it he carried maps, acorns that glowed faintly, and feathers of birds long forgotten by time. He listened not just with his ears, but with his heart. And on the night when Luma vanished, Theo had felt the silence ripple through every branch. He knew something was changing. One afternoon, while hopping across mossy stones by a clear stream, Theo heard a rustle unlike any he'd ever known. It wasn't wind, it was a voice, quiet as dew. "Seek the hollow tree," it whispered. "The golden light returns." Theo froze. The hollow tree hadn't been seen in generations. Some said it had sunk into the earth. Others believed it only appeared when balance was broken and when it was needed again. Without hesitation, Theo dashed through the woods, his tail flicking with purpose. He passed ancient roots, glowing mushrooms, and fluttering lights that blinked like stars among the shadows. After hours, the forest grew still. Then he saw it, a towering tree, unlike any other. Its bark silver gray, its center cracked open like a mouth, revealing a spiral staircase made of roots. The hollow tree. Theo entered. Inside, the air shimmered with old magic. Paintings danced on the walls, images of creatures past and present. Luma appeared among them, radiant, surrounded by gold and green and light. At the heart of the tree was a pool of crystal clear water, and floating above it, another feather. Not gold this time, nor silver, but a soft blue, like sky before sunrise. As Theo reached for it, a voice echoed again. This time, the magic must be shared, not hoarded. The forest remembers. Theo nodded solemnly. He took the feather and tucked it into his satchel. He knew where he had to go. The next morning, as Oliver and May tended the garden, a rustle in the branches drew their eyes upward. Theo had returned, and he wasn't alone. Behind him fluttered dozens of birds, squirrels and foxes, each carrying seeds, feathers, or glowing stones. The forest had awakened. As Theo landed softly on the garden's fence, Oliver and May looked up in astonishment. Behind him, a parade of animals appeared, each more remarkable than the last. Owls with silver-tipped wings, foxes with fur like embers, rabbits that left trails of glowing footprints, and birds that sparkled like the night sky. But none of them made a sound. They stood around the garden's edge in a perfect circle, as if waiting. Theo hopped forward, removed the blue feather from his satchel, and placed it gently into the soil. The ground shimmered, the plants rustled, and then the garden breathed. Leaves twirled without wind, petals lifted, dancing midair. The trees that surrounded the garden bowed ever so slightly, as though acknowledging something far older and wiser than themselves. Then, from the earth, a tree began to grow. But it wasn't like any tree Oliver and May had ever seen. Its bark was pale and smooth like riverstone. Its leaves changed colors with every heartbeat: green, gold, violet, silver. And as it rose, it formed a canopy that stretched over the entire garden like an umbrella of light. At its base, a circle of stones emerged, each carved with symbols from languages no longer spoken aloud. The fox stepped forward and placed a glowing acorn onto one of the stones. The owl followed, setting down a feather that pulsed with light. One by one, each creature offered something. Then Theo turned to Oliver and May. "This is the circle of creatures," he said, his voice clear and calm. "Long ago, when the world was still young, Animals and humans lived in balance, but over time, greed whispered louder than kindness, and so the forest slept. He looked toward the tree. Now, because of your change, the balance stirs again. But it cannot be one family alone. It must be many. May stepped forward. Then let it begin again, with all of us. And so it did. From that day on, the garden became more than a place of beauty. It became a gathering ground. Children from nearby villages came to learn stories from talking foxes. Elders came to sit in the shade of the tree of renewal. Farmers traded their strongest seeds for one drop of dew from the garden's leaves. And Oliver and May, no longer chasing gold, became keepers of something far richer. And every full moon, when the garden glowed brightest, the circle of creatures would meet. They would share news from the corners of the forest, stories of rivers that sang, and stars that blinked in patterns never seen before. And overhead, the blue feather remained, now nestled among the tree's highest branches, watching, glowing, waiting. On the night of the next full moon, when the garden bathed in silver light and the tree of renewal shimmered with quiet power, something unexpected happened. A golden glow pulsed from beneath its roots. It was faint, like a memory returning from deep sleep. Theo, ever watchful, crept closer and brushed aside soft moss. There, hidden among the roots, was a round stone. But it wasn't a stone. It was smooth and delicate, warm to the touch, and it gleamed like starlight kissed with sunlight. A golden egg. But this one was unlike Luma's. It didn't shine with wealth. It hummed. When Theo placed a paw upon it, a low tone vibrated through the soil and the trees. The garden fell into silence. Then, music. Not from an instrument, not from any mouth, from the egg itself. A single note stretched outward, followed by another and another, forming a song so ancient that the stars themselves seemed to sway. Oliver and May felt it in their bones. Luma, resting in her nest beneath the tree, opened her eyes slowly. She remembered. Long ago, before she was known as Luma, she had been part of something greater. A circle of hens born not just to lay eggs, but to sing the energy of the forest into form. Their golden eggs weren't meant to be spent or sold. They were seeds of harmony, each containing a note of the original melody that once kept all life in balance. But the song had been forgotten, and with it, the power of the eggs was misunderstood. Now, with the eggs singing once more, the memory returned, not just to Luma, but to every creature present. They each saw a vision. A sky filled with spiraling lights, forests that stretched across lands now lost, creatures of all sizes gathering in unity, guided by the music of a single hen who sang as she walked. And as the egg continued its melody, something even more incredible happened. The tree of renewal responded. Its leaves began to chime like crystal bells in the wind. Petals from the garden opened in sync. Even the stars above twinkled with greater brilliance, as if echoing the rhythm. Then, from the shadows, an old raven approached. He was covered in silver dust, and his feathers had seen many moons. "I heard the first egg's call," he rasped, "and I bring its name." The garden leaned in. He looked toward Oliver and May, toward Theo, toward Luma. "The name is Aelura," he said. "It means harmony. The egg must hatch where kindness has replaced greed." The egg shimmered. A crack formed, and from within, something began to move. A gentle breeze swept through the garden as the golden egg cracked further. The light from within grew brighter, yet it didn't burn. It wrapped everything around it in a peaceful glow, like the warmth of a memory long forgotten. With a final click, the shell split open. From inside, a small creature emerged. Not a chick, not exactly. Its feathers shimmered in 100 shades, reflecting every color of the garden. Around its head was a delicate crest that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat made of light. Its eyes, wide and deep, held the quiet wisdom of the forest itself. It stepped forward, not with fear, but with grace. Luma bowed her head. So did Theo. The other animals followed. Even Oliver and May felt their knees soften. They weren't looking at a pet or a treasure. They were looking at a beginning. The creature chirped, and though the sound was soft, it echoed far beyond the garden. Trees on the horizon leaned in. Flowers bloomed in moonlight. Rivers miles away shifted their paths, curving gently toward the garden. "What is it?" May whispered. The raven answered with a croak, "It is Aelura, reborn." The hatchling turned toward the great tree of renewal. As it stepped beneath its branches, the leaves turned golden for the first time. The stones around the tree began to glow, and from within the garden's soil, new blossoms appeared, flowers no one had ever seen before. Aelura opened its beak and sang. But this wasn't just a melody. It was a call, a vibration that rippled through every living thing. In distant forests, sleeping animals stirred. In villages lit by candlelight, children woke from dreams of glowing birds and whispered songs, and the world listened. In the days that followed, everything changed, but not in the way Oliver and May once hoped. There were no piles of coins, no cities paved with riches. Instead, a different kind of treasure began to grow, one that couldn't be counted, but could be shared. The garden became a sanctuary. People from all walks of life came, drawn not by greed, but by the strange feeling that something better was possible. They brought seeds, stories, and songs. In return, the garden gave them peace, clarity, and hope. Aelura stayed at the heart of it all. Every evening, the little hatchling would sing beneath the great tree, and in its melody, listeners heard what they most needed: courage, forgiveness, joy, or stillness. Oliver and May, once so driven by fortune, now found their wealth in connection. May taught children how to plant and listen. Oliver, who had once chased coins, now chased stories, gathering the memories of every visitor and preserving them in a book called The Garden Beyond Gold. Theo remained the quiet guardian, watching the balance and guiding new visitors. Luma, proud and peaceful, laid no more golden eggs. She didn't need to. Aelura was enough. And though the world still had its chaos, its greed, its storms, there was now a place where harmony lived and grew. A place where patience had triumphed over haste, where kindness had outshone wealth. And so the song continued, not just in the garden, but in the hearts of all who had listened.